Did you know that it was 4 years ago that Lucasfilm Games became the official identity for all games published by Lucasfilm? This, at the time, felt like a new chapter for Star Wars gaming. It felt like the beginning of something big.
Look at the size of that thing.
Especially because at the time, there were only 2 years left on EA's exclusive license with Disney to make Star Wars games. That deal expired in May 2023. And here we sit, now in 2025, wondering, where are all the Star Wars games? I can't see them. Where are they? But I think I have a few reasons as to why they're not here. There are currently 6 AAA Star Wars games in development that we know about, and they include the third Jedi game from Respawn Entertainment, Star Wars Eclipse from Quantic Dream, the Knights of the Old Republic remake, Bit Reactor and Respawn's strategy game, Amy Hennig's Skydance new media action-adventure title, and also allegedly a Total War-themed Star Wars game. So with 6 titles, that seems like there's a lot on the horizon, but why does it feel like they're nowhere in sight? I still can't see them.
Are we blind?
Hey everyone, it's Andrew. It's odd to think that at this point in time in gaming, Marvel is seemingly doing way better than Star Wars and has a better reputation than Star Wars. Now, Marvel is of course also owned by Disney, just as Star Wars is. The only difference between the two is that Marvel games are licensed by Marvel Games, whereas Star Wars games are licensed by Lucasfilm Games. So both these companies have the same parent company. So how does it feel like Marvel at this point in time are getting it so right with the release of Marvel Rivals, and with a lot more to be excited about in the near future, versus Star Wars? When it comes to Star Wars, we're not even sure we're getting a new Star Wars game this year. I feel like it's the first time in such a long time where we really don't know when and what is next. And now this is probably not a fair comparison, but Marvel released Marvel Rivals, which is one of the top games on Steam and is doing so well internationally, and Star Wars released Star Wars Hunters, which is doing well, but is a mobile game, and is Star Wars' current answer to an arena shooter.
Begun. The arena shooter or has.
Now we all know that creating a team-based shooter can be quite risky, but it seems like Marvel are really nailing this at the moment. Now, don't you think it was strange that Disney gave a 10-year exclusive license to EA to make Star Wars games? I know a lot of people have criticized this, but just thinking back on this now, that era of Star Wars gaming is over, that EA no longer have that exclusive license, and other companies, publishers, and developers can now make Star Wars games, it seems so strange thinking they would give it to one giant publisher like EA.
Do it.
And this, of course, is part of the reason I think we are still seeing a lack of Star Wars games. In their time with the exclusive license, EA released 4 or 5 AAA Star Wars titles, being Battlefront 1, Battlefront 2, Star Wars Squadrons, Jedi Fallen Order, and Jedi Survivor, and then, of course, Galaxy of Heroes, the mobile game. It was basically a game every 2 or 3 years, which, when we compare it to the previous era of Star Wars games, when LucasArts, the developer, was still around, which were basically Lucasfilm's in-house development studio, the sheer amount of difference in game output is ridiculous. Back then, it was pretty standard to get at least 2 Star Wars games per year, and they usually weren't small titles. It was at least one major title a year because so many different studios were making them, and back then, yes, you could argue it was also faster to make games. There weren't necessarily online components you needed to consider, graphics weren't the same, it was a bit simpler, and perhaps they could pump out more content and produce more. Okay, but a couple years ago, Disney expressed that they want to make at least 2 Star Wars games every year. There were sources suggesting that Disney wanted to pump out a new Star Wars release at least every 6 months. And you could also argue that's kind of what's been happening, just not in the way you think. For example, last year we actually got 3 or 4 new Star Wars games. In Star Wars Hunters, mobile game, we got Star Wars Outlaws, which you'd call a AAA major title, and we also got the Star Wars Bounty Hunter remaster and the Dark Forces remaster and the Battlefront Classic collection. So you could say Disney have actually been doing this from a certain point of view.
From a certain point of view.
Thanks, Obi-Wan.
A certain point of view?
But I don't think mobile games and remastered ports was what everyone had in mind when they learned this news. There have essentially been no major Star Wars game announcements since 2022, unless you don't count Star Wars Total War. But we learned about the new Jedi game, Star Wars Eclipse, the KOTOR remake, and the Skydance new media game all the way back in 2021 and 2022. And because there's been no news for such a long time now, it seems like these games are no closer to being released than they were back then, even though that doesn't really make sense, but that's how it feels. That's what I'm feeling. Let me play as Ahsoka Ahsoka Tano. Do people even want that anymore? That's what everyone wanted like 3-4 years ago when Battlefront was a thing. Do people want an Ahsoka game still? I wouldn't mind. I'd say yes. But surely they should make an Ayla Sakura game first. That's what George Lucas would have wanted. Going back to my initial comparison, I feel currently more excited about the future of Marvel games than Star Wars games. Marvel 1943 Rise of Hydra is supposed to be releasing this year, a game that's going to allow you to play as Captain America and Black Panther. This game is being made by Skydance New Media, who are the same developers making a new Star Wars game, action-adventure based, being led by Amy Hennig, who was the creative director on the original Uncharted games. I have a lot of hope for this, and I think a lot of people do as well. Also, the Marvel game, even though this is just a CGI trailer, looks really good. Mwah, mint. And then we've also had announcements of Marvel's Wolverine, the Iron Man game, a Black Panther game, Marvel's Blade, and then also Marvel Mystic Mayhem, whatever that's supposed to be. But at the moment, Marvel also has a live service game in Marvel Rivals, which Star Wars doesn't really have, unless you count Star Wars Hunters, which I'm not counting, because it's a mobile game at the end of the day. Marvel Rivals has content updates, seasons, it's a live service game, and it's going to continue seemingly for quite some time into the future. Oh, and just to mention, we also likely have a Spider-Man 3 game coming at some point, so there's even more to look forward to. That's not to say all these games are going to be great. They of course kind of failed with Marvel's Avengers, and I don't think that game really had the lifespan Marvel were hoping it would, but I mean, at least they're putting out games.
From a certain point of view.
Now maybe this is naive of me, but when it comes to Star Wars, I do believe that everything Disney and Lucasfilm Games have said they're going to do, they are going to do, or are seemingly doing. It just seems like we're probably not there yet. Changing their branding to Lucasfilm Games only 4 years ago, and that seeming like the start of a new era, wasn't that long ago. 4 years isn't a huge amount of time in passing in the video game development world. And also EA's exclusive license ending only a year and a half ago was also not that long ago. Of course, Star Wars games were already in development at a few other studios during that time when EA still had the exclusive license, and they just couldn't be released until after 2023. For example, Star Wars Outlaws was in development for 3 or 4 years, so that was prior to the license expiring. But I think it's more likely they're only just really getting started. They're only just starting to build up some pace and get off the ground with some of these games. But at this exact moment in time, it still feels like we're feeling the effects of the Disney takeover, of the shutdown of LucasArts, and of the cancellation of games like Star Wars 1313, Star Wars First Assault, the Darth Maul game. Even though this was 10-15 years ago now, it still feels like a trickle-down effect. Also, we know a number of games were cancelled that were in development at EA. For example, Visceral Studios was closed down. Amy Hennig was previously working there before going to work at Skydance New Media, a new studio, and at that time they were also developing another action-adventure Star Wars game to be published by EA. That was called Project Ragtag, and there are a few other ideas and iterations of this that were thrown around but eventually cancelled. We know Battlefront 3 never got off the ground. RIP, my goodness, that game is never going to get made.
It's a trap!
I will grow old before we ever see Battlefront 3. Before any of us ever see Battlefront 3. I will turn into a Force Ghost before we see Battlefront 3.
True.
And then just last year, we also had the cancellation of the Mandalorian game, which is being developed by Respawn. This is supposed to be a single-player, first-person shooter, I believe, similar to the Titanfall style of games, but you play as a Mandalorian and go bounty hunting. Sounds like a great game to me. What happened? Didn't get off the ground.
Somehow.
Now, honestly, I get it. Making video games is very hard. It takes many years, takes a lot of money, a lot of resources, is kind of a huge risk for these companies. But at the same time, they were doing it all those years ago. They can do it again. We just need new Star Wars. We need more. I've been saying this for so long now. I feel like I've been making these videos for years, talking about, hey, these are the features I want in Battlefront 3. When's that ever gonna happen? Oh, never. That's right. But it's at this point in time, I can just hear the words of Master Yoda and Master Obi-Wan in my head.
The boy has no patience.
You will learn patience.
And I think honestly, that's all we need more of. We need more patience. Sure, it doesn't seem like the near future is too bright for Star Wars games, with seemingly nothing coming out this year. But Disney seem to be really hustling behind the scenes to work out what they're doing with Star Wars. With all the different project ideas you hear and thrown around, we're getting the Mandalorian film, getting the film about the origin of the Jedi, we're getting potentially a Rey trilogy, which no one really wants. I'm not sure if you want that. I don't know. It could be fine, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Trying to reset Star Wars, but they're taking Star Wars back to the cinemas. And I feel like with that, gaming will also make a return. These are just my thoughts though. Let me know what you think. And if you want to know exactly why we don't have Battlefront 3, then watch this video here. I did a lot of research to figure out what actually happened to EA's Battlefront 3 that they started working on at DICE after Battlefront 2. And also for more Star Wars and me, come follow me on Instagram, Twitter, join my Discord and TikTok. And thanks for watching this. My name's Andrew. I'll catch you soon.